There are men who live by chaos, and then there are men who bring structure to it. Omar Little walked through Baltimore like a rumor with a shotgun, feared by drug dealers, mocked by the police, romanticized by the streets. But the truth is quieter than the legend. Omar wasn't just a robber. He was a man trying to impose order on a world that had none. And in doing so, he exposed something uncomfortable about everyone around him. In The Wire, Omar operates outside the traditional power structure. He isn't a kingpin, he doesn't move product, he doesn't claim corners, he robs the people who do. A stick-up man with a reputation, a whistle that announces his presence, and a code, one he repeats more than once. I ain't never put my gun on no citizen. It's a simple rule, but in Baltimore's economy of violence, it makes him almost principled. Almost, because Omar lives in contradiction. He steals from criminals. He kills when necessary. He testifies in court. He robs drug lords. And somehow, he becomes both villain and folk hero. And maybe that transformation from criminal to folk hero says less about Omar and more about the ecosystem around him. Baltimore doesn't create heroes. It creates survivors. And in a system where survival is the highest virtue, reputation becomes currency. Omar understands this instinctively. He doesn't hide in the shadows the way other predators do. He whistles. He announces himself. It's theatrical, almost mythic. And that theater matters, because fear, when it is predictable, becomes a kind of order. Dealers know what Omar wants. They know the rules. They know the consequences. There is something almost contractual about it. Compare that to the organizations he robs. Stringer speaks of business, but the corners bleed. Avon speaks of loyalty, but bodies fall in broad daylight. Marlowe speaks of silence, and entire neighborhoods go quiet. Omar, ironically, is the most transparent man in the room. He tells you exactly what he is. A robber. Omar's code is what separates him from everyone else, at least in his own mind. He won't harm civilians. He won't rob on Sundays. He believes there are lines you don't cross. But what does that really mean? When Bird kills a working man, someone outside the game, it violates an unspoken boundary, not just legally, but spiritually. Omar understands something others ignore. Once violence spills beyond the game, it loses its structure, and structure is the only thing keeping chaos from swallowing everyone whole. That's why the Sunday shooting matters. The streets may not believe in much, but they believe in ritual, even if that ritual is fragile. Omar's code isn't morality in the traditional sense. It's containment. He doesn't reject violence, he regulates it. And that's the contradiction. Because a man who robs drug dealers at gunpoint cannot claim innocence, but a man who draws lines in a lawless world forces everyone else to reveal their own lack of boundaries. Omar becomes a mirror. Police admire him privately. Dealers fear him publicly. Citizens whisper about him cautiously. He exists between systems, too ethical for the streets, too criminal for the law, too honest for either side to fully accept. The uncomfortable truth is this: people don't respect Omar because he's good. They respect him because he's consistent. In a world built on betrayal, consistency feels like integrity. And that says more about the world than it does about Omar. His legend grows not because he's moral, but because everyone else abandons morality completely. When the bar is low enough, even a criminal with rules looks honorable. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy. Omar didn't change the game. He just played it honestly. In the end, Omar Little wasn't a hero, and he wasn't just a villain either. He was a man trying to survive a system that devoured anyone without a code. His legacy isn't the bodies he left behind, or the fear he inspired. It's the question he leaves behind. If even the outlaw has principles, what does it say about everyone else? And maybe that's why his name still echoes. Not because he was righteous, but because in a city without order, he tried to create his own, quietly. But mirrors reflect more than image. They reflect weakness. And for all of Omar's control, there are moments when control slips. Brandon's death changes everything. Up until that point, Omar's robberies feel strategic, calculated, almost procedural. But when Brandon is tortured and displayed as a warning, the game stops being about balance. It becomes about grief. And grief doesn't follow code. Omar says he never puts his gun on a citizen. He says he won't work on Sundays. He believes in ritual, but revenge blurs ritual into impulse. The war that follows isn't business, it's personal. And that distinction matters. Because The Wire constantly asks a question: is the game ever really just the game? Or does everyone eventually pretend their emotions are strategy? Omar likes to believe he operates differently. But when he stands over Brandon's body, when he tracks Bird, when he testifies in court, we see something more human than myth. Pain, not legend, not theater, just loss. And in that loss, the contradictions grow heavier. The courtroom scene with Levy makes this even clearer. Levy calls Omar a parasite, questions his morality, tries to reduce him to a criminal statistic. And Omar doesn't deny what he is, he reframes it. You got the briefcase, I got the shotgun. It's one of the most revealing lines in the entire series because Omar understands the hypocrisy at the center of power. He doesn't pretend he's clean, he just refuses to pretend others are. And that's why he unsettles people, not because he steals, but because he exposes the thin line between legality and legitimacy, between professional and predatory, between system and street. Omar may live outside the law, but he understands its performance better than most who operate inside it. And yet, even with that awareness, he cannot escape the gravity of the world he moves through. For all his reputation, for all the whistles and warnings, his end is not cinematic. There's no final showdown, no grand speech, no operatic collapse, just a corner store, a child with a gun, a moment that feels almost casual. And that might be the final contradiction. A man who became myth, undone by randomness, not by a rival kingpin, not by police, but by the same unpredictable current that runs through every street he walked. Because legacy in The Wire is fragile. The newspapers barely mention him. The streets move on. The game resets. And maybe that's the quietest truth of all. Omar built a code to survive the system, but the system was never built to remember him.